You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Every day as a small business owner feels like solving a puzzle. One moment you're cruising along, and the next, there's a shipping snag that has you scrambling. But here's a surprise you will like. With Progressive, small business owners save 13% on their commercial auto insurance when they pay in full. So go ahead, surprise yourself. Get a quote in as little as 8 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
He gave me a book on art forgery. I found myself drawn to these old masters. How did these artists take paint from a palette, arrange it on a canvas? I began to unlock the secrets. I was a storehouse of knowledge of how to create an illusion, present it to an experienced expert, manipulate his mind, and convince him and bring him to the inevitable conclusion that the painting is genuine. We flooded the market with my paintings, and I couldn't believe what I did. I couldn't believe it. Then the dominoes started falling, and eventually the FBI were led to my door. They uncovered a mountain of evidence against me.
But they never actually got you. At this point, you've sold a lot. You've got like $1 million in cash. You sold one painting for $717,000. Why did it go away? Why did you never get indicted? And how are we having this conversation?
I guess it's the greatest story of all.
To hear how Ken Perenni made millions in art forgery, dodged the mafia and the FBI, subscribe to The Jordan Harbinger Show and check out episode 282 in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my dismissive co-host, Brett.
So dismissive, Alice. We got some one-star reviews that claim I'm dismissive of you.
Of women.
Which I would never be.
How dare you? But as dismissive as you are, Brett, sometimes we rejoice when there's a dismissal, because justice is actually done when there's a dismissal, and that's what we get to talk about today in the Aaron Spencer case.
Yes. You know, every now and then, things really come through. We always tell you guys, have faith in the system. The system's going to work out. Justice is going to be served. And it isn't always. Sometimes there are failures, but every now and then, you get to celebrate the right decision being made, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Indeed. Okay, so this is not the first time that we've talked about this case, Brett. We've talked about it actually at length because you may remember Aaron Spencer, who is also running for sheriff right now, who won the primary and now is poised to be able to win the elections later this year. He was charged with murder when his young underage daughter had been sexually assaulted by a man who was charged with those sexual assault crimes, then let out on bail, came back to get his daughter into a truck and drove away, called 911, drove after them, trying to save his daughter, was able to run him off the road, and in a altercation, shot and killed the man who was preying on his daughter despite being out on bail for those exact charges. And in a kind of shocking turn of events, the prosecutor's office turned around and charged him, Aaron Spencer, the father who was defending his underage daughter, with murder. So we've talked about this before. That was the state of play until about 2 days ago.
And this case, you should go back and listen to our previous episode on this. This case has had a very strange, circuitous route to trial. So the initial judge on the case was actually the judge who set a relatively low, it seemed like a pretty low, bond amount for the man accused of actually raping Aaron Spencer's daughter. That judge then gets the case where that person who that judge let out kidnaps the girl again and is killed. Imposes an extremely restrictive gag order. Gag order gets appealed. The Supreme Court says you need to do something about this. Judge basically ignores the Arkansas Supreme Court. Arkansas Supreme Court eventually removes the judge altogether, puts another judge on the case. In the meantime, there's been some evidence that's been lost that may or may not be critical to the case. We're going to talk about that. New judge comes in, and Aaron Spencer's defense attorneys file several motions. They file some motions that basically say, hey, if we're going to trial, we got to do something about this lost evidence. We need to figure out how we're going to handle that. But we don't even think we should go to trial. We think the loss of that evidence alone is enough to justify dismissal here, for all the reasons that we're going to talk about in this episode today. So you have this new judge who comes in, who doesn't have any connection to the prior case, receives these motions, they're fully briefed, and in somewhat of a shock, I don't know, like we had said, not that we're taking credit because it's not
I'd
us,
like to say that we had something to do with it, but I don't care if they don't have no idea who we are, because justice had to be done here.
When this was filed, we said the judge really needed to grant this because this case needs to go away for so many reasons. We had hoped the prosecutors would take responsibility and voluntarily dismiss it. Well, that didn't happen. But on June 4th, the judge did grant a motion to dismiss the indictment. This is incredibly rare. It's difficult to even explain how rare this is. Almost never happens.
I've never had a case get dismissed on motion to dismiss.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think I have.
The closest I can think is when we did the Alec Baldwin case, and that happened in the middle of trial. It was a little different situation, but a pretrial dismissal based on what you're going to see is incredibly rare and definitely something worth talking about. And one thing I thought was really interesting about the order, which is up on our website, you can see it there, or you can find it. It's pretty easy to find at this point. It's been published pretty widely. I'll say this about Arkansas. Much better docket system than a lot of states. Very easy to find stuff on there. So good for you, Arkansas. You're ahead of the game when it comes to dockets. But one of the things that the court said that I thought was interesting was in dismissing this decision is based on the particular, unique, and specific facts and circumstances of this case. So that tells you something. I will tell you, I have filed a lot of motions. So I used to do all the compassionate release stuff for our office. And there would just be times where there would be someone who, you know, they were like the perfect inmate. They were a trustee and they had taken all these classes and they'd never had any disciplinaries. But because of quirks in sentencing law that have since changed, they would have like 150-year sentence because of stacked charges. And so they're never going to get out unless they have some sort of compassionate release. There's no parole or anything like that. And so you get these compassionate release motions. And, you know, the substance, the person, you think, this is someone, yeah, I could see this person getting compassionate release. But their actual arguments for compassionate release, pretty weak. So whenever I would concede those motions to get the person out because I thought they should get out, I would always make very clear that this was based on the very specific, unique, narrow circumstances of this case, because I didn't want anybody else citing to that and saying, well, you know, this guy had a hangnail, and he got out, so I should get out too. I've got worse than a hangnail, right? And so I would use that language to basically say, look, this is not precedent for anything. This is about this specific case. And I think the way the judge puts that in this case, it tells you something about the motivations behind this, and that maybe it's not entirely about the pure legal question we're going to talk about.
And look, You know that we agree that this is an extraordinary circumstance where the motion to dismiss should have been granted. But in order to show that this is on the unique and specific facts to this case, the court has to start by going through the facts in this case. And that's what the court does. So in this order to dismiss the case, the court goes through the facts of the case. Of course, we're familiar with them. We started the episode with them. One interesting thing, though, the wounds to Fossler were to his chest, abdomen, and his left and right arms. But there was also blood on the gun. Now, this tells you a few things. First, Fossler was not shot in the back. So that would be a big one, because obviously if he's running away, that's a different situation than, maybe some sort of a tussle or self-defense, right? Second, there was no coup de grace or execution style shot to his head. So the wounds to Fossler does not show that either he was shot in the back and then Spencer walks up to him, stands on top of him and says, "This is for my daughter," and shoots him in the head. That didn't happen. That's not what these wounds show. Third, Fossler was close enough to Spencer that his blood was on the gun. So this wasn't some long-range shooting that might indicate Spencer had some other choice. This was face-to-face, hand-to-hand combat. So these wounds and the blood on the gun is consistent with Spencer's story that Fossler lunged at him after Spencer was trying to get his daughter away from him and essentially had no other choice but to shoot and kill Fossler.
And this is all in the background section of the order. Has nothing really to do with the dismissal, but I think it's important for a few reasons. There are people out there, we have faith in the system. We assume that prosecutors are operating under good faith. We don't typically accuse people of not operating under good faith. So I think a lot of people had said something which is totally reasonable, which is there must be something else here that we don't know that justifies this prosecution. We must be missing something. We're all condemning this prosecution. We don't have all the facts. And people had speculated, maybe there is evidence of a coup de grace, an execution shot after he was already on the ground. Or maybe there is evidence he was shot in the back. Or maybe there is evidence that this isn't what Spencer said. Well, the court's recitation of the evidence seems to foreclose all that. It seems as though this is exactly what Spencer said, which makes the decision to prosecute even more shocking. And I'll just tell you, I don't think there is anything else. I think if there was something else, it would have come out by now. It would have been in a filing somewhere. There would have been an argument about why Spencer was in the wrong here. And we don't see it in this order, and we haven't seen it in any other kind of public filings. Okay, so that's sort of the background of what's going on here. So he gets charged with this crime, and the case is moving forward. And then, as you're going to see, there's the loss of some evidence. So we're going to talk about what that evidence was. But before we talk about that, let's set the stage with the law so you know what you're looking for when you're thinking about the evidence here. So the Arkansas case that controls is a case called State v. Clark. So we talked about this before. There are all sorts of United States Supreme Court cases that are all about this kind of question, but every state has its own Supreme Court, and usually those Supreme Courts have interpreted United States Supreme Court opinions and binding precedent on them with their own constitutions and established a rule for that state. And those rules will be a little different. So the rule in Arkansas when it comes to lost evidence is essentially there are two ways you can violate due process when you lose evidence. It's interesting, by the way, that this rule comes from a case where a trial court dismissed some felony counts for failure to preserve body camera evidence, and the Supreme Court actually reversed that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later and what it says for the future of this case. So in that case, reversing a trial court, the Supreme Court said two ways you can show a due process violation. Number one is when the government destroys or loses material evidence whose exculpatory value is apparent before its destruction, and the defendant cannot obtain comparable evidence by any other reasonable means. So this is sort of the first and the one that doesn't require bad faith. So if you have evidence, which everyone agrees is going to be exculpatory, something the defense is absolutely going to use when they get to trial, and then the state loses it or destroys it, even if they didn't mean to, it's a complete accident, that can be a due process violation if the defendant cannot then obtain comparable evidence by any other reasonable means. Just to give you an example of sort of when this doesn't matter, go back to Delphi. You may remember in the Delphi case, there were some interviews that were done, they were recorded, and the recordings got erased. And that was one of the things that the Delphi defense attorneys argued about. Well, similar rule would apply in Indiana. It's not exactly the same because it's Indiana, but it's all based on sort of Supreme Court precedent anyways. So in that case, number one, it's not evident that any of those discussions would be exculpatory. Number two, there's comparable evidence in the form of the written reports on every interview, and you can obtain the same evidence by other reasonable means. You can just talk to the same people again. It's not, they weren't dead or anything like that. So sort of give you an example of when the loss of quote unquote evidence would not be sufficient under this rule.
In addition, if the government acts in bad faith to destroy evidence useful in the defendant's case, that would also represent a due process violation. That seems pretty obvious right there, right? So the court starts with the bad faith, right? Because it's a more difficult bar to meet. Here, the Lanoke County Sheriff's Office had the dash camera that was mounted on the front windshield of Fossler's truck. In fact, there were actually two cameras recording everything in front of the truck, inside the truck, and potentially behind the truck. So it goes without saying that this is incredibly valuable to understanding what happened that night, because it would have captured what happened. And you only have a he said, because obviously the other person part of the tussle is dead.
And this is one of those things where, if you're an officer, you come upon a shooting, one guy's saying there was a fight, and you notice there's a camera that may have recorded everything. There should immediately be okay, we need to be really careful with this, right? Like, this could be the whole case. Whatever else we do, we need to be careful of this. We need to follow the book. We need to do everything by the book. Well, they didn't do anything by the book. So Detective Robbie McCain shows up. He sees the camera and he removes it from its location without photographing it or otherwise recording or documenting its position. That's a violation of how evidence is to be collected. You want to know exactly where it was. More importantly, the dash camera's internal settings were not preserved. So we don't really know what the internal settings were at the time. And the battery was allowed to drain, which, according to an expert who testified in an evidentiary hearing, and I didn't really understand this. This seems like a weird thing for a camera to do to me, but apparently by letting the battery drain, that resulted in a reset to the default settings of August 1st, 2024. And the incident itself occurred on October 8th, 2024, rendering the dash cam useless after that time. So apparently anything that was internal to the dash cam, and once again, I don't really understand why this would be true, but this is what the order says, and this is what was testified to, is useless. You can't actually use it anymore. So you've essentially, by allowing it to drain to nothing, you're not going to get anything from the internal storage of the dash cam.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, national average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary. The first law firm to answer usually wins the client. But when you're in court in a deposition or heads down on a case, calls get missed and opportunities slip away. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, the smarter way to run your firm's communications. Quo, Quo, gives your firm speed to lead routing, an AI receptionist that provides 24/7 support, and one shared inbox so every attorney, paralegal, and staffer stays in sync. Quo is the #1 business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 reviews, built for how modern teams actually work. More than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing firms, rely on Quo. Quo's speed to lead routing makes sure new client calls never go unanswered, even after hours. A 24/7 AI receptionist and local numbers that boost answer rates means your firm stays competitive whether your team is in court, in a meeting, or out of the office. Every attorney, paralegal, and staffer can also work out of one shared number, so everyone sees the full conversation history, so your team responds faster and every client feels like a priority. Be the firm that answers first. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/prosecutors. That's QUO.com/prosecutors. Quo. No missed calls, no missed opportunities.
Ever notice how life's best stories don't happen in your living room? They happen on the open road, out on the water, or parked under the stars. At Progressive, they get that you want to focus on the experience, not worry about the what-ifs. That's why they offer quality insurance designed for your ride, whether that's a boat, RV, or motorcycle. Adventure with confidence. Visit Progressive.com and see how easy it is to protect your favorite way to get away. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in D.C. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Just to show you how crazy this is, when you know it's not like after the fact, like, you know what, a dash cam, we should have known that security camera that was at the top of the building happened to catch the right angle. We now know that this is the right angle and we need to go preserve this. This is obviously a camera that's going to be very important because it's on the car where this entire event has occurred, right? And to call back to a case that I hate to talk about, but to show you what lengths police officers typically go through to ensure that evidence is preserved and to record everything as is. Do you remember the Karen Reed case? I hate that case, but remember how they got lambasted on the stand at trial because they tried to collect drops of blood in the snow with Solo cups. Okay, that may sound crazy now, but those were the lengths they were going to try and preserve evidence because they knew that it was going to be important later. That probably wasn't the best way to do, but honestly, what else were you going to do? So they were trying to do all they could to preserve snow, which melts, right? It may sound crazy to us after the fact, but that's what's going through the law enforcement officers' minds. We have to do everything we can to preserve evidence. Here we have dash cam. You don't have to have 2020 looking back to know that this is going to be great evidence. This is clearly going to be the case. This is clearly going to tell you whether or not you need to even bring charges against Aaron Spencer, whether there's been a crime or it's self-defense. And not only do you take it without recording it, you don't take the measures that even if you didn't know it was going to be reset, you would at least, at the very least, download everything within it as soon as it's in your possession. They do that with phones, by the way. They don't wait for phones to die from battery life. They take a phone and they immediately do a phone dump. They didn't do that here. They didn't do anything. They let it just drain and go away. All of the evidence.
Pretty much.
So there was, however, a micro SD card in that camera. So Detective McCain removed that micro SD card and viewed 4 videos, each about 15 minutes in length. He claimed to place that micro SD card back into the dash cam afterwards, returning the camera to its original manila envelope. So this also was not standard procedure. Standard procedure was to send electronics to the AG's digital forensics unit to avoid potentially accidentally wiping the data. That's true for me. I never handle any of the SD cards or any sort of black box. That never comes to me. It always goes to a forensic lab and then I get sent the files. But the actual physical holder of that data is kept in evidence, usually sealed up once everything's been extracted from it.
And I don't know what he was doing or what he was thinking, because this should have just, once again, a man's dead. The other man's claiming it was self-defense. That night, it should have gone to the AG's digital forensics unit, and they would have handled it. They would have taken care of it. They have expertise here. They would have made sure nothing was erased, nothing was lost, et cetera, et cetera. But for some reason, he wants to view it first before he does that. And look, not a conspiracy theorist. Hate conspiracies. Hate to say people are in cahoots or whatever. But you've already got a case. And this is the kind of behavior that makes people believe that. Because you've already got a case that's going to be controversial. There's the fact he was out in the first place. There's rumors flying around about why this is happening and who knows who and who's friends with who. And then you have this officer who is not following standard procedure and seems to be, he wants to get an advanced look to see what's on it. Now, why would he want to do that? Well, you can imagine.
And not write like a police report, for example.
Yeah. I mean, you could imagine he wants to see what's on it to see whether or not it's going to be helpful to whatever the outcome he wants. So let's say he wants Aaron Spencer to go to prison. He knows everybody messed up on the Fossler case the first time around, and he wants Spencer to go to prison and cover this whole thing up. Say that's what he wants to do. Well, maybe if he sees on the video clear evidence of self-defense, he might take certain actions, which we're going to see in a second, to ensure that that evidence doesn't get out. Or maybe he's on the other side. Maybe he thinks Spencer absolutely did the right thing, and he wants to make sure it doesn't matter to him. He could have walked up to him and shot him in the back of the head, and that's fine because that's what Fossler deserved. And so he wanted to see, is there evidence that he acted improperly? And then maybe, if that's the case, the evidence will go away. Either way, the fact you're doing this is going to raise lots of questions. But it gets worse because he says he took the SD card, he put it back in the camera, puts it in the manila envelope, sends it off to the AG's office. Now, it takes a really long time for this to get to the AG's office. I mean, there's some argument about this, about whether or not there's some misentry of dates, so maybe it's a little bit faster. But either way, we know that the prosecution sends a letter to the defense about the video on the card. Now, this is another thing people speculated about when I was saying earlier. Maybe there's something we don't know. People speculated maybe the thing we don't know is what's on the video. So maybe the officer saw Aaron Spencer act in an illegal way, and that was on the video, and he can testify to that. But the video, we don't have the video, and so we're going to have to deal with that. Well, not according to the letter the prosecution sent to the defense. According to them, there was nothing useful on the camera. There was nothing inculpatory, and there was nothing exculpatory. According to them, the videos, for reasons that no one could really explain, were all after the incident, and that they only contained video of flashing blue lights. So essentially, the video starts recording afterwards, or if there were videos before, somehow they were destroyed. But we're never going to know whether that's true, because somehow, between when he viewed the videos, put the SD card back in the camera, dropped it in the manila envelope, and sent it to the AG's office, wouldn't you know it, the SD card disappeared. The camera made it, but the SD card didn't. And the camera had no internal storage, or any internal storage had been removed because of that failure to charge it or whatever. A little unclear from the order. But either way, there's no card and there's no internal video.
Honestly, I would have found it more convincing that this was lost if the camera and the SD card were missing, right? Like the whole package got lost. This is kind of like, so our wonderful artist, Hannah Hill, she got married yesterday, by the way. Congratulations, Hannah. She was a beautiful bride. But she designed these beautiful poker chips for Vegas CrimeCon for us. And a poker chip, this one was worth nothing. But if you felt it from the outside of an envelope, you might think it was a gold coin or something. And so when Brett tried to send her a poker chip because she had designed it for us, he packaged it up really well to make sure you couldn't tell it was a coin, but still, people who sift through your mail know what they're looking for. And wouldn't you know it, when the package arrived to Hannah, the poker chip was gone, but the envelope was there, which lets you know that someone stole what was inside. And it would have been honestly a little bit more convincing that it was just lost if the whole package didn't arrive. That's what I feel like here, right? The fact the camera arrives without the SD card is interesting, shall we say.
Interesting. So the court that goes through all this, here are the findings that the court makes. Because remember, the court is trying to decide whether or not this is bad faith on the part of the prosecution. Because if it's bad faith, remember, we have those two tests. The first, in some ways, the court says this is the harder test. And in some ways it is, because you got to prove bad faith. But it's a little easier on the prejudice prong. Because for bad faith, you only have to show it might have been useful to the defense. If you show bad faith and it might have been useful, you're good. On the other side, you've got to show it was clearly exculpatory and there's no way you could recreate it. So that's actually, in some ways, a little harder. You don't have to prove bad faith, but the prejudice you have to prove is higher. So what the court's going through here is, do we have bad faith or not? So I'm just going to read you sort of the findings about Detective McCain and sort of the findings that the court makes. Detective McCain did not photograph the dash camera position or location and did not document its existence in the incident report, which is, it's weird you wouldn't even document the existence of the most important piece of evidence, but whatever. Detective McCain admitted that the camera was not logged into evidence, but was instead stored in his personal office rather than the evidence room. Also not great. Once again, the most important thing. The dash camera was not logged into evidence until over a year after it was collected. A violation of preservation of evidence procedure, I would say. I mean, once again, it could literally have the video of the entire incident. Detective McCain removed the memory card from the dash camera before logging it into evidence and viewed the contents on the computer in his personal office. Detective McCain said this was the only dash cam the sheriff's office has ever seized during an investigation, which even more reason to treat it carefully. You have no experience with this at all. Okay. After viewing the contents of the memory card, Detective McCain testified he placed the card back inside the camera, placed the camera in an untaped envelope, and put the envelope in his office cabinet rather than logging it into evidence. Not great. Once again, he's just keeping it himself. The AG's office did not receive the SD memory card containing the data from the dash camera. They did receive the dash camera. None of Detective McCain's actions regarding the dash camera were documented in any database or log. Detective McCain's failure to place the dash camera into evidence resulted in the camera not being logged in the system of evidence until 10/16/25, October 16th, 2025. There was no mention of the existence of a dash camera in any discovery or law enforcement document until it was returned from the AG's office on October 16th, 2025. At which point, by the way, everything's gone. Like, nobody knew about it. I mean, you can imagine if the defense knew about this camera earlier on, they would have been saying, hey, make sure we preserve this, make copies for us, like all sorts of other things. So they found a whole bunch of other stuff. Memory cards, phones, computers, all kinds of other things. They sent all of that to the AG's office without viewing them first. So all the other electronics they found in this case, including the electronics in the car, in the truck, in the victim, quote unquote, victim's truck, they sent all that to the AG's office pursuant to their policies. The only thing they did not send was the dash camera and the SD card. McCain did not document accessing the SD card or what he saw when he did so. As an aside, it's like whenever a court makes an aside. As an aside, there is a reasonable probability that he didn't see what he said he saw, based on the sworn testimony of expert witness Brandon Purchase, an affidavit of Jason Stachy, that powering off the camera does not delete anything from the SD card. However, the court was not present at the hearing, so no credibility findings can be made. Remember, this hearing happened under the other judge. So the other judge did this hearing. This judge is having to just read off the transcript. So he's not making a credibility determination about what McCain testified to. But he's pointing out that it doesn't make any sense that the only thing that is on this camera is after the shooting. That just doesn't make sense. There's no reason that would be true. But that's what he's saying. And of course, there's no way to prove it.
Sounds pretty bad, right? And because of this, what Brett just read you, it sounds very damning. And the court here, new judge here, found that all of this, quote, gives the appearance of a cover-up. Yeah, you think?
Which is not great, right?
Which is not great. You don't want to hear that, right? Because this is the way I talk to, like when I teach a law school class, I say, this appears to be AI. Prove me wrong. It's not good. You don't want to hear that because really what the judge is saying is this is a cover-up. I may not have the evidence of it because we don't have the evidentiary hearing before us. That's not the finding that I'm here. But all these facts are really bad. And it certainly gives the appearance of a cover-up. And because of that, the court concluded that the defendant, Aaron Spencer, had established bad faith, that high bar. And the court found that the dash cam was potentially helpful to the defendant. I also agree. I don't think that's a stretch at all, especially because the wounds on Fossler's body matches what Aaron Spencer says actually happened. But we don't know because the only thing that would have captured it was lost. lost, quote unquote. So the court then addressed the other test. And this is how you appeal proof your order, because it is a big deal to dismiss an indictment here right before trial as well. And so what you do is you go through the different levels, essentially say, okay, what if the appellate court said, you know what, bad faith is a very high standard. We don't find that. Then there's a fallback here. And that's why the court addresses the other test. The court accepted that the contents of the dash cam had exculpatory value that was apparent, and there was no way to replace what was on that camera. Also, you can see how that would be the case. And the only witnesses were the deceased, the daughter, who was a minor at the time, and the victim, and Spencer. So only these three. One is dead, one is compromised, and the other is the defendant. This distinguishes from the body cam where one or multiple officers could testify as to what happened on the video. So because of all this, the court concluded, therefore, the court acknowledges that dismissal is an extraordinary and extreme remedy. However, based on the totality of the circumstances and the unique, specific, and particular facts and circumstances of this case, the court finds that conduct by law enforcement was so egregious that dismissal of this case was warranted. Therefore, this case is dismissed. It is so ordered.
And look, I mean, so a couple of things that probably immediately spring to mind. Number one, Alice mentioned appeal. Number two, could they bring this case again? Is this with prejudice or without prejudice? The court doesn't say with prejudice in this case, but it is, because ordinarily, if you have a case dismissed and you bring it again, you're able to cure the problem. You know, let's say you messed up an indictment. You forgot an element. And so the grand jury returned an indictment without the proper elements. And that's dismissed because it's a defective indictment. You just go back to grand jury with an indictment that contains all the elements. You have them vote again, and then you're good, right? In this case, the whole point is it's dismissed because they've lost this evidence. Well, unless the evidence just turns up somewhere, which I guess is a possibility, this isn't coming back. And frankly, even if it did, because of the bad faith finding, I think this judge, who would be back in front of, would say, no, we're not doing that. So the case is over as far as the judge is concerned. It's not coming back. Could it be appealed? I mean, it could, but in Arkansas, the decision to appeal rests largely with the AG's office. And I find it hard to believe that anyone in the AG's office, even if the Lonoke County prosecutors were dumb enough to try and appeal this instead of just letting it go, that anyone in the AG's office would say that's a good idea. So I think this ends this, whether you think this actually meets the high bar or not. And look, I actually think it's a close question. There's a lot of smoke here. How they handled this was very poor. I mean, it's obviously incredibly negligent. I don't think there's any question about that. I frankly think we probably get down the second prong. You know, the problem is we just don't know what's on the video. The only person who knows what's on the video is the officer. He's saying there's nothing on the video. He's not that credible, particularly given the findings of that other expert. So I don't know.
Especially with how differently it was treated than the other.
That's the thing.
If it hadn't been treated differently, like the whole appearance thing, it doesn't look good.
Oh, it stinks.
It's
smells
terrible. And by the way, we could have avoided this whole opinion if the prosecutors had done their job and dropped it. Maybe they brought it because they weren't sure. And then once they looked at all of the evidence and lack of evidence that they had, to dismiss. So this judge was forced to write this opinion that lambasts law enforcement in Lonoke County. And now there is a black mark on everything they do, unfortunately. And it certainly absolutely feeds conspiracy theories that law enforcement is corrupt. And that is horrible for all law enforcement. So we're here because the prosecutors didn't do their job too.
And another thing, the prosecutors, I am just disgusted with every prosecutor involved in this case. Because here's what else they did. The day after this came out, McCain was fired. The sheriff's office fired him because of this, which, I mean, frankly, he now has a published opinion.
Talking about bad faith.
He acted in bad faith.
You really can't ever testify again in court.
Suggesting that he lied under oath. He didn't make the finding, but only because the judge wasn't there. That's the only reason he didn't make that finding. He got fired. So, you're the prosecutor in this case. One of two things is true. You either think McCain's a good guy who just made a mistake, or you think he's corrupt. If you think he's corrupt, you should dismiss the case. If you think he's a good guy who just made a mistake, you should dismiss the case. Either way, you should dismiss the case. The case is going to fail. Number one, you're going to lose if it even makes a trial. Number two, you're probably going to lose in this motion. And in losing in this motion, you're going to lose an officer. So why they just could not bring themselves to do the right thing in this case, I will never understand it. And it doesn't, the simplistic things people always, oh, it's such a corrupt county. There's so much corruption in that county. You just wouldn't even believe it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm sure it is, but it's not like Fossler was some upstand. It's not like he was the governor.
They were prosecuting him.
Yeah.
They
so
were
why
prosecuting
are they doing
him.
this? It doesn't even make sense from a corruption point of view why you would do this. It's just pure prideful
I think it was just
stupidity.
it was just heels dug in. They messed up, then they kept messing up, and I don't think there was corruption. I think this is what happens when people dig their heels in and they don't want to admit when they've done something wrong.
I mean, it's like that old saying, when you find yourself in a hole, first thing you do is stop digging. And it's like they never stopped. It wouldn't surprise me if if they've already asked the AG's office to appeal this, because they're that absurd. It wouldn't shock me at all. Hopefully they have not done that. And like I said, I can't imagine anyone with sense would do that. What I hear from my sources in Arkansas is that the AG's office was sort of very divided on even defending the gag order. Defending the gag order caused a lot of controversy in the AG's office, which makes sense to me because it was a terrible gag order. I mean, I understand why you feel like you have to, but then they lost that one. And the Arkansas Supreme Court made very clear how they felt about this case in that the signals have just been flashing for so long in this case. And it is astonishing, the inability of the people in charge down there to see the writing on the wall. I'll never understand it. If anybody from that office wants to come on and explain it, you have an open invitation. We won't even ask you questions. It'll be the easiest interview you've ever had.
We
you
won't
just
even
talk.
ask you questions.
I'll give you 15 minutes.
Because
more
you
if
know what
want
they're
it,
going to do.
To just
we don't
explain
need to talk because they'll come with a shovel and keep digging.
I mean, whew, I just don't get it. I really don't.
But look, I really am. Thank you to this judge for doing the right thing. It's not fun writing these opinions, by the way, because these prosecutors, these law enforcement officers come before this court all the time. But I'm glad that justice, though it took a circuitous route, was finally dealt in this case. Aaron Spencer was never supposed to be charged. Even after he was charged, the charges should have been dismissed, and it took until this. But this is the judicial system working, thankfully. Now, look, it's horrendous. He's been dragged through, all of this. I think he's paid for his own attorneys. This ties you up. He was having to be on national television when he probably would rather not be. So even though we ended in the right place, none of this should have happened in the first place. I hope he does. He will win the sheriff's office, by the way.
And, if you read this, just once again, the unspoken victim in this case, his daughter, like, not only was she raped by this guy, but he clearly, and this is what makes me, once again, I don't know, just this case makes me so angry. These prosecutors. So this opinion gives us a little bit more color into the kidnapping itself. And this just, if you just want to feel both enraged and sick to your stomach, this will do it for you. So this man's raped his daughter, been let out of jail. He's now on the street. Aaron Spencer, he hears his dog is barking, and his dog didn't bark. Dog's not a barker. So when he hears his dog barking, he realizes something is wrong. So he goes to his daughter's bedroom, and he knew what had happened earlier. He goes in there to make sure she's still there. He opens the door, and he thinks his daughter's in bed. And you can imagine the relief from that. But then he realizes it was actually one of her stuffed animals with his daughter's hoodie over it. So, I mean, any of you who are parents or just have children in your life you like, imagine the feeling in that moment when you realize, oh my God, he's got her again. And then your wife's calling 911, you're rushing out, jumping in your truck, taking off, just hoping against hope you're going to find him, that you're fast enough, that your dog warns you soon enough that you can catch him before he does whatever he's going to do to her. Just put yourself in those shoes.
And you also know that he is out on 48 charges of sexual assault where she is the sole witness. So not only is he probably going to go and rape her again, he has every incentive to end her so that he doesn't get convicted.
I mean, it's I cannot. How could you know? Putting aside whatever happened when he is driving and he sees the truck, he sees Fossler's truck heading back towards Fossler's residence, rams him in the back, gets him off the road, jumps out of the car, tells him to let his daughter go. His daughter tries to get out of the passenger door. Fossler grabs his daughter and pulls her back in. Then Fossler gets out of the truck. He tells him, get down on the ground. And Fossler says, F you, and lunges at him. And then he shoots him at close range, gets the blood on his gun. How in the world do you hear those facts and think, we need to prosecute this case for second-degree murder? I mean, everyone involved should lose their license. All of them. They should never have the power to prosecute a case again. And when Spencer becomes sheriff, anybody who hasn't left or been fired in that sheriff's office who's involved should be fired. The whole place needs to be just cleaned out and start over. Because
for what it's
whatever
worth,
it is,
Aaron Spencer's on the way to clean out the sheriff's department.
just man, just crazy.
Well, there you have it. I hope this is the last time we talk about the Aaron Spencer case. If anything, just to congratulate him on winning the sheriff's election later this year. But there are consequences when law enforcement and prosecutors' offices don't do their jobs. And we had a front seat, view to it here. And I'm glad that he gets to now be a free man. And I hope that he and his daughter, especially his daughter, has time to heal from all of this.
Absolutely. And she can be his focus from now on. She doesn't have to worry about going to prison for the rest of his life, in addition to everything else that's happened to her. And I hope, as you said, best for him. Good luck as sheriff. Somebody said, I don't know, he didn't really have any experience. Couldn't be any worse than the last guy who was sheriff. I mean, goodness gracious. Maybe we need some people who don't have experience in Lonoke County. Maybe we can just get somebody off the street to be the district attorney. They do a better job than the one who went to law school. Anyways, sorry, pull back my rants. So yeah, good luck to him. Good luck to his family. Good luck to her. I hope that she has an amazing life. And as far as I'm concerned, he's a hero. He's what every father aims to be. I hope if I was ever in his situation, I'd do the exact same thing without hesitation. And you should be able to know that you can do that to protect your child and you won't be prosecuted for it. And it's just disgusting that in Arkansas, of all places, in Lonoke County, of all places, this happened. So that's all I got. Sorry.
No apologies. You know who should be apologizing? Lonoke County, but not you. Well, I don't know. We're pretty heated. Do we want to do a question today?
Let's do a question. Why not? The only time I want to see this case again, and maybe he can sue them.
I was going to say, he has a pretty good civil suit here.
Yeah, he does. So, I don't know, the Lonoke County has a whole lot of money, and he'll be working for Lonoke County soon, so maybe he can just, clean the place up.
He can sue him for a pension.
We can make the next Walking Tall can be about him instead of the other guy. All right. So as you know, hopefully by now, if you leave a 5-star review on either the Prosecutors or the Prosecutors Legal Briefs and leave a question, we will do the very best we can to answer your question. So let's see. I still need to read this, The Myth of the Rule of Law. That question is just like hanging out there. Let's see. Okay, so they kind of answered this before, but whatever.
We'll do it again. It's all good.
Beckty wants to know, I was wondering if you could talk in more detail about the career decisions that you've made and how you got to where you are today.
Do you want to go first? You had the most recent change.
That's true. Well, I will say this. My career has been marked by making no effort to have a career. Like I've never made a decision based on like what was good for my career. And I see people, my classmates, and obviously I went to Harvard, right? So Oh, they're just all like, it's so important that they make all the right decisions because they're special butterflies. They're going to change the world. And so if they mess up and aren't as successful as they could possibly be, then really it's a loss for you out there. You didn't get to experience their brilliance. So like every decision they made, they like agonize over. And I've just never been that way. Like I never took jobs for money. I never took jobs because I thought, well, this would be really good for the next one. I just did whatever I thought was interesting. So that's always been my career, is just doing the next interesting thing that kind of just shows up. I mean, I've just left a really good job with really good retirement and benefits and everything else to do whatever it is I'm doing now. And that's just how I've lived my life. And so that's why I have a podcast.
Because this is the last thing you would think any lawyer would do, honestly, for like longevity of your career.
And all our boss, who's a great guy, was like, why in the world would you want to do that?
That's stupid. Go for it. Why would you want to do that? I think this is why Brett and I get along so well, because in the legal world, especially where we went to school, people are so calculated. Literally, I still remember, like at a Halloween party at Yale, someone was dressed as a horrendously offensive. I'm not even going to repeat it here because it's so offensive. It's more offensive than you can even imagine. But that was this. I'll tell you after we go live. Yeah, I'm not going to say here because it was so offensive, which says a lot, right? Halloween costume. What do you do at Halloween? You take pictures. The whole point is to like take pictures. And this person covered his face and he was like, well, I have to think about my judicial career. And I was like, if you thought about your judicial career, you wouldn't have dressed up as this, you stupid. And so he like, every picture he like covered his face, but it's like still incredibly offensive. But he like, that's all he could think about, you know, as a first year law student. He's like, well, you know, I'm not going to say these things on the record and I'm not going to take these pictures with my face in them because I'm going to be a judge one day. And that's the way a lot of people that we went to school with lived their lives, which is to say, they weren't motivated by being good people or even good lawyers. They were just motivated with the next gold star. And my response to that was a complete shun to all things that were gold stars. And I mean, of course, that's easy to say because of the school that I went to. But truly, I was like, I don't want a clerkship. I didn't think I would ever, in fact, practice law. And that's why Brett and I get along so well, because I really have a disdain for people who are not motivated by doing the right thing or doing what they're passionate about, but doing it just because it will give them the next leg up comparative to the person next to them. For what? What is the point? Like, dust to dust anyways. Like, I'm definitely not going to be listing my accomplishments or my resume on my headstone. So I don't even know what the ultimate goal is. And I will say this much. I am into the next decade of my life now, which also means so are my colleagues. The amount of depression in my class is actually, and I don't say this lightly or even flippantly because I think it's incredibly sad, is so high. My colleagues are partners at some of the best law firms. They're GCs of massive companies. They've taken companies public. On paper, you would think that they are so impressive, but whenever I have coffee or lunch or dinner with a classmate, especially in the last year, the like internal sadness is so deep because I think ultimately if you're going to chase the things that are not worth chasing, they're never going to be fulfilling. So that was not a way to answer the question except to say, I totally agree. You should not, live your life calculated in any way. I give this advice to all young lawyers. I say, be excellent in the job that you are in. Never think of a job as like, whatever, this is short term. It's a 6-month thing. It's a 9-month thing. I don't really care about this. Whatever you do, you have to be excellent at because that will open up the opportunities that you can't even imagine for the next step. I've truly enjoyed every step of my career, not because I sought any of them out. In fact, I've barely applied for any jobs because opportunities came up in my current position and I loved it. I got to meet Brett. Had like the time of our lives. And I think so far, hopefully my career's not over, but like so far, I've loved my career because I've truly enjoyed and felt passionate about everything that I've gotten to do. And I feel that it's a privilege I got to do each of the things I've gotten to do. Even though some of those moves, objectively, my friends who were seeking the gold stars, we're like, why would you choose that? Why would you start a podcast spending your time on true crime instead of like writing Supreme Court briefs? What's wrong with you? Ha ha, who's talking about Supreme Court briefs more often than they are now?
Yeah, and look, I mean, yeah, this question turned serious all of a sudden, but Alice is 100% right about the depression and everything else. I don't know when this happened. I feel like we as a society, all of our values are wrong. Like everything that we tell kids is important, like what they should be doing, the meaning of life, like all of it, it leads to this endless competition for the next gold star, as you put it. And guess what? Having known a lot of those people who achieved the gold star and were like still not happy, still looking for that fulfillment, thinking, it's going to be the next thing. Today I'm running a division of the Department of Justice. Tomorrow I'll be the general counsel for a Fortune 10 business, and that's when I'll be once I leave that with a lot of money, that's when I'll be happy. And they're just never happy because the thing that they're striving for is not the thing that leads to happiness. And this is a little different, but one of my good friends in law school, the thing about going to a big law school is they really want you to go make a lot of money so that you can then give the money back to the law school. So the moment you get to a place like Harvard or Yale, they are trying to get you to go out and make a lot of money. And this friend of mine he was a couple years older than me, so he was a 3L when I was a 1L. And at the end of his 3L year, he was telling me, he's like, look, when you get here, you think you can do anything. And by the time you leave, they make you think you have to do this one thing. And don't be like that. That guy is now a judge. I don't know if your friend's a judge. He's a judge.
No. Oh, I was going to follow up. No. That person, so not a judge. Things have not gone great in life for him. Like, not because he's not incredibly accomplished, but I think he chased things in the wrong way. And so, like, personally and professionally, not great.
Yeah. And look, Alice said it right. Whatever title you have or job you have, yeah, maybe you become a fading picture on a wall somewhere, or maybe it says it on your tombstone. But at the end of the day, that's all that's going to matter. Your friends and your family and the people you loved and the time you spent with them and the experiences you had are going to matter much more to you when you look back on your life, I think, than how many hours you build this year. And I get it. It's easy to say for me sitting here with a successful podcast, but I hear by not chasing those gold stars. So
a successful podcast that did not win the Clue Awards.
Moderately successful.
Actually, we love Crime Weekly. So proud of them.
So proud of them.
We got to keep it humble. Okay, but I will give a little bit of practical advice because that was very esoteric. One thing is, someone told me this, and this is how I lived the beginning of my career, which I think has freed me up because there are actual practical concerns about being able to pay your bills, and if you have children, feed your children, right? So when I got my first job out of law school, I had a very, very helpful mentor who was 30 years ahead of me in the career, still a mentor today. He said to me, live like you were still that poor law student and take all the money that you make in your first 1 or 2 years, as much as you can. Eat beans every day and try to put yourself in a position where you can say yes to any opportunity, where you can serve in public service, where you can go and do a podcast, and that you don't have the golden handcuffs and have to take the legal job just because it pays the bills. And that was really good advice, which seems common sense, but I do think especially young lawyers who are this is the biggest income I've ever gotten. It's more than my parents made put together. And who cares if I paid 6 times this to go to law school? I'll keep making this for the rest of my life. And then you get in a position where maybe 10 years down the road, your dream job does come available, but you are not able to leave the big paycheck to be able to do your passion in life. So that is some practical advice. I think this is for anybody, really, is to set yourself up in a position where you can say yes to opportunities you may not even know exist yet. So I did. I literally ate beans for 2 years to pay off my law school debt. And, I don't eat beans now. So that's good.
It's amazing how much debt you can get into making a lot of money.
Yeah.
You can almost get into more debt making a lot of money than you can making a little money. And then it's not even that you love the lifestyle and you can't quit. It's you have all these
It's
liabilities
like
you have to pay.
You bought the Maserati. Darn.
Exactly.
Like now you have a car payment.
and the boat house and everything else, Anyway, this is why we need a lifestyle podcast.
We can. I think that's after dark. But that was a very good question. I hope
That's a great question.
I don't know if we answered you, but thanks for letting us be able to pontificate about our career so far. It's always fun. But guys, let us know what you think. Ask a question. If you leave a 5-star review, you get to ask any question. It can be about the law or not, true crime or not. We're here for it. Let us know what you thought about Aaron Spencer. And if you have any questions or if you disagree with us. And if you do, just be ready to explain why. But as always, it is a pleasure to see you guys at CrimeCon. We've already booked our tickets for the next year, which is in more than a year. So we hope to see you next year at CrimeCon. But Brett, before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I don't know when it starts working, but code prosecutors for 10% off your CrimeCon tickets as we record. They go on sale tomorrow.
That's right. Well, thank you guys, and we'll be back soon. Until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutors Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined as always by my Let's try that one more time. Roll it back. It's been a whole week. Does that amp you up? Because it amps me up.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's like, it's time.
And it gave me time to swallow my chocolate chips.
There you go.
It's been a minute. I miss you guys.
It has been.
I mean, we got to see it took us a week to just recuperate from CrimeCon.
It's true.
At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
Truth is ours.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
What is that?
Yeah, it's a World Cup holder.
Like the soccer tournament World Cup?
Holder. For the world. Fits every car, holds every cup.
It has a Carvana logo?
Yeah, Carvana made it. They buy and sell cars, so they made a car cup holder. So, got any good cups lately?
I used to, just couldn't figure out where in the world to put them.
The World Cup holder, brought to you by Carvana, proud sponsors of the World Cup holder.
Sign up today to win yours at cup-holder2026.com. Not authorized or endorsed by FIFA. Not a real product. For parity and fair use purposes only.